Alright, we're back, and in this little episode, for want of a better word, we're going to have a look at Cornell Notes and how we can use them to plan essays and to revise kind of past paper questions. So in the last video that I shared, we talked about this, the different sections, the key kind of components of Cornell Notes and how it can be useful. So here's another format. Like I said, or as I said before, I'm showing you this on an iPad just because it's easier for me to film it. But I would prefer to write on paper, and you can write on paper. You literally need paper and a biro, maybe a ruler. That's all you would need. That's all the fancy equipment you need to do this, but it can be really, really effective. Okay. For the purposes, just in case you wanted to know, I'm just using an iPad and an Apple Pencil. That's how I wrote this. The app is Good Notes. It is a paid-for app. I don't know how much it is exactly. I think it's something like £8 or £9 or something. It is great for writing, and it is a lovely app to write on, and if you are looking at kind of digitally writing notes, then it is definitely a good option, but you don't need to buy anything. Remember that the most important thing is that your notes are functional, and if you think that digital note taking is for you, then obviously apps are something you can look at, but ultimately you need some method to record information, and whatever that method is, it just needs to work for you. It doesn't matter how much it is. Okay, right, essays. So we've got our 4 sections again, but this time it's slightly different. So we've got our essay title at the top. That's going to be the question that you've been given from the past paper. Then we want our essay basically in note form here. Now you can go into a bit of detail here. It can be fairly detailed notes. You don't want it to be super, super, super detailed, but you want your full planning process here. And again, I've got an example I'll show you in a second. You want your full planning process here because, remember, this is kind of the last stage that you then come back to in terms of revision. You then want your conclusion or your key findings down here. And remember, before I said that the summary is a great way to practice those sort of thesis statements, those strong, powerful statements. Well, again, by practicing down here, you'll be able to write a conclusion like that, and that in an exam is great, because when you look at exams, when you mark exams, and you see that someone is able to have crafted a well-structured essay, and in particular a conclusion, when most people are kind of trying to get to the end of the paper and just trying to get their answer down, and that's it. It's crafting a conclusion that is well thought out actually is something that not a lot of students do, and it can make your essay sort of stand out that bit more. Then we've got here keywords and questions to check back against the question or the mark scheme. So if it's a past paper question, then you can be given the mark scheme. With media, there's not a huge amount of past papers or mark schemes available, but there'll be kind of indicative mark schemes that your teacher can go through, or any teacher feedback can be used to help in this column here as well. So let's have a look at one. We're sticking with video games as an example. So this is my video games kind of model notes. So I'm going to zoom in to different parts so you can see. So this is David Gauntlet suggests that the media provide audiences with resources which they use to construct identities. Explore this idea in relation to 2 video games you have studied. So this is a theory-based question, or a theorist-based question, because we've got David Gauntlet there. They will give you one like that at A2, or they're likely to give you a theory-based one at A2. They do sometimes do it at AS, but it is very common at A2. Then we've got 2 video games. So I've highlighted the keywords in the question. That's something that you guys will know to do. That's kind of a standard thing that we do. And then this is my notes part here. Now, I've not included any kind of key terms here. I could have, and if I was to go back on these notes, then I could include some maybe some questions here that I could use as a reference when I came back to this. But at this point I haven't, because these are my notes that I wrote down in immediate response to this question. So this is my kind of like brainstorming of ideas. So I've got the idea of pick and mix theory, because I just needed to write down David Gornett, right, he did the pick and mix. Then I've got Jenkins, because I think he'd be really useful to bring in terms of participatory cultures. So they're my theorists that I could use. Then I've got this idea of ownership through interaction, modifications. So I've just written down those kind of key responses to the question, what I think I could talk about. I haven't really thought about texts yet, I've just written those down. Then I've got my 3 texts. Now the question asks for 2, but I've studied 3. So I'm going to write them down and just do a little mind map around each one to see which ones would be best. I wouldn't necessarily do this in the exam, unless I was really stuck as to which texts I would use. But if I've done this enough times in kind of practice and revision, then I'll be so confident with my texts that I'll just know which ones are best for a question. Because if you do enough questions, then the questions that come up in the exam will be similar in terms of theme or theorist, etc. And you'll know which texts will fit best. So I've included all 3 at the moment, but that isn't kind of necessarily what I would do in the exam. But these are revision notes. This needs to be detailed at this point, so that's why I've included them. I've decided, as you can see, so I've colour-coded each text separately, and then my kind of the key points that I wanted to make, then I've put in pink. So I decided that I'm going to go with Sims and Grand Theft Auto. And then I've got the introduction triangle. Miss Hassan's introduction triangle is kind of the go-to way of constructing an introduction. I wouldn't suggest doing any other way. This is effective, it's succinct, and it works for pretty much any question you can be asked. So I'd stick with this, and you can see here that I've used my own little sort of abbreviations, so that if I was to cover up this side, then you would still, or I'd still have an idea as to what I'm talking about. So it's slightly modified for media studies, but it works in the same way as you would in English. We've got key concept. So our key concept in this particular question is David Gornett's pick and mix theory specifically. We know it's an audience and representation theory, but it's a bit more complex than that, and that's where it gets a bit tricky, in that the key concepts that you look at in media studies can be interlinked, and are so at A2. So that really sort of depends on the question, and in this question we've got David Gornett. So I've mentioned his theory. David Gornett's pick and mix theory hypothesizes that audiences choose elements from a range of media to construct identities. That's the first sentence of my introduction. Done. Then I've got my texts. My texts are games, so then I talk about gaming. And then I've got my thesis, and my thesis statement covers both GTA, which I'll highlight now, and The Sims. So I've got GTA and The Sims in my thesis statement, so I know that I'm talking about them. I know that because I did my little mind maps, I know what I'm going to be talking about, and I sort of state my opinions in my thesis. Then I jump into my main paragraph. So I write my first topic sentence here, or my thesis statement, and then in note form I develop that. So for this particular one, I've got mods and user-generated content. So the use of user-generated content, including mods, enhances gameplay and encourages a diverse range of identities to be constructed. That's my idea of my thesis statement, and then I've included my examples from GTA and The Sims just in bullet points. Then, in terms of highlighting, I've highlighted kind of the bits that if I was going to just remember those bits and try and get those little sort of sound bites into the exam, like intertextual identity construction. I quite like the way that sounds, so I want to try and get that into the exam, and I think it's a good concept to explore. So I've highlighted it. I've then put in this column here just mods and UGC. I know what that is, so when I come back to revise this and this isn't here, or this is covered up, then I've got my introduction triangle that covers everything. I've got my my key points, and again, see online communities, and then I would come up with one more. And then what I did here is I summarised just into a phrase what I would say for GTA and what I would say for The Sims. So both of the texts are kind of explored then in my notes in full, but I can still revise from this kind of summary section here. And then finally, the bit at the bottom is where I'd write my conclusion. So this is how you would use the Cornell Notes system to plan essays. If you manage to do this with every single question that your teacher gave you, then you're going to be in a really sort of strong position in terms of your notes. Everything will be there for you to revise from as well, because as before, you can just cover up this section and then you can just revise from this section here. And this can be used in conjunction with other revision methods, but the notes have already been put into a format that allows for active revision and active recall as well. And that's really key. Trying to get yourself into a system where you are able to use what you've got rather than revision, meaning going back through your book and just copying bits out, because that is work for work's sake, really. And you want to try and be as efficient as possible with your time, of course, because the more efficient you are with your time, then the more you can kind of have your revision as focused time and do other things around your revision and not let it kind of consume you. So I hope that this was useful in some way. Like I said, this is just a kind of sample of what you can do. And this works for lots of other things as well. So say if you're given a worksheet and you need to revise the worksheet and you want to use this system, but there's no way to include the column or the bit at the bottom or anything like that. Well, a really easy way to do that is with these, okay? Just use a post-it note. So you can have two different colours of post-it note. You could have one stuck on the side that has all the key terms, and you can have one then stuck in the bottom corner that that summarises. So if you're using booklets in your subject, then again you can do this. You might even be in a position where a lot of your materials are online for your subject, and it's still possible to do this. You can either open your materials up into some kind of app that allows you to write on them, and you can put your notes and your keywords in that way. Or another option is to have a notebook, and in that notebook you just have two sections where three sections I suppose, where the main bulk of your notes are online, but you've got the title of each lesson on each page of the notebook, just a list of keywords, and then your summary at the bottom, or key points or questions and things. So basically everything in this column. And then in the same way that with active recall you cover up this bit and you just focus on this bit, and if you got stuck you go back to this bit. Well, you can do that because you've got your notebook that can focus on this bit. If you get stuck, you can open up your online notes and go back to this bit. Okay? Obviously, if you're doing it online, you can insert things like screenshots and things like that if you are analysing audio-visual or something. But again, the hybrid version can work really well for that as well. So if you have loads of notes, say if you're analysing a film, you've got loads of notes with timestamps, and you had kind of screenshots for that as well, then you can save the screenshots into an online folder, and you can use that in conjunction with your notes when you're revising, and again do the whole thing where you're looking at the column and then you're picking things out from the main body of notes too. So that's the Cornell Notes system. It can be really, really effective and can work really well in terms of breaking down huge amounts of information and sort of chunking them up so that they're easier to revise. That's it for this video. As I said, hope it's useful, and I'll see you in the next one.